This is Shauna.
Hi. We've emailed Mike.
Yes,
Nice to meet you. How you doing? Good to see you. Thanks for coming. I'm just getting our webcasting technology squared away here.
Okay.
Or I'm trying to make it look like that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, nothing there. So, and I think I'm at a point now I don't like to pretend anymore.
Okay, we have got to figure out how to turn the sound off.
Expecting a room full of shell-shocked people.
We try not to even make mention of it, so as not to cause them any undue distress.
Yeah. I think it always started at the beginning saying there's never had a PILI fellow that hasn't passed the bar.
Really?
So.
Good to know.
We always tell them that, but it doesn't always reassure.
I don't know why.
Let's see. Can you peek into Shayna and see if she can see and hear okay?
Hi there.
How you doing?
Good. Early birds, huh?
Yes.
One of the cheap tickets.
She's trying to connect to the internet still. It's taking a while.
That's what I like about technology, all this fancy technology you can't get on the internet.
I know, right?
These seminars have mostly been from DePaul though, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you guys are all familiar with the technical accompaniments in these rooms?
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
PILI strives for perfection.
Yeah. Preparedness, perfection.
Sorry.
I'm Shauna. Nice to meet you. What are you doing?
I'm Malcolm.
Your first
Brian
time?
Martin, nice to meet you.
What are you doing? Yeah.
So I'm a fellow, I guess. I'm a fellow at Chicago Legal Clinic.
If you don't start until right after Earth Day or something.
Yeah, working with Ed Grossman.
Yeah.
He's a legend. Quite the guy. Yeah. How about yourself?
Well,
Head home
Malcolm's taking
on
me
Friday
from Chicago Apple Seed, and I'm working at Chicago Apple Seed.
Would you go to school?
You have mine.
You buy it, sort of.
Oh, really? Do you like it?
Oh, I love it.
Love champagne?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I haven't been back in a while, but I love it.
I know. It's good. I think I'm gonna come back in October. I miss it already.
So, did you know Jocelyn Trapp by any chance?
Yeah.
Another character.
Another character.
He's actually one of my buddies. I worked with him last summer.
Oh, what firm? I don't.
Winston?
Oh, okay. Are you also like, Dave Bauer?
Yep. Dave, I know Dave, yeah, but Justin and I were closer. We were in the same floor offices next to each other and everything.
It is more transactional.
Right.
You know Greg and Conway.
Yes. Another great guy. I enjoyed working with him.
We've worked with Greg on, not this year, I just didn't work out, but he's summer associate.
It's like a full year,
To
like,
be
you know,
on board.
Mhm.
And worked out very well.
I'm trying to think if that was an option for us last summer.
Stuff is happening now.
And I can't recall.
I don't think so, I think it was 2 years ago.
2 years.
Less than 2 years, going 3 years ago.
I know.
I guess
I don't
he
know. I
said
figure,
they've
like,
changed
what the
everything,
heck, I
big
mean,
firms have changed everything, including what they ask their
Right.
increasingly smaller summer associate
They
class.
changed it up a
What
little
did
bit,
you
right?
do from work?
All right, here we go.
I'm not really sure. I went in.
So it's kind of tricky. You have to right click and go to settings and then go to mic. If it's on it, it might be on a different tab. And if you see this hitting red a lot, which it is kind of now because we're standing this close, that might be a problem.
Okay.
And maybe we will tell both of our speakers just to make sure they stand.
Okay. So I'll sit up here today.
Just once we get the volume
Yeah.
set, I think you'll be fine to
Okay.
go. And I'll let you know by leaving a message if the volume needs to be adjusted.
Monday.
Okay.
Yeah, yesterday.
Okay, me too. Yeah. See?
Got it.
It makes so much more
Some
sense.
time I'm like, I have no idea what to do or we can't do it. I'm like, shit.
I always anticipate when I get virtually
Yes.
nothing out of somebody for the first 5 weeks. Because they're working 3 hours.
Yes, I like that.
They're worrying about the boss.
What did you do?
Totally distracted.
I did a podcast for it and just have some. Oh, cool. Okay.
Doesn't make any
Did you
sense.
have a good experience with that? I'm thinking about maybe doing it.
But it was a model that was based on people starting September right after Labor Day.
Okay.
Right.
Their firms.
When does Winston start?
October 14th.
That's just good.
Yeah,
Right. So many connections. I thought, I loved my summer. The summer.
What were you saying, that the fellowship model is based on after Labor Day?
Well, I mean, I think that it used to be 5,
Okay.
the reason that it had to be done by the end of, basically the end of August essentially, or 5 weeks starting right after the bar is, it used to be that, big firms would start their first year associates right after Labor Day. That was like pre-2009.
Yep.
And now it makes no sense because people never start before middle of October.
Mhm. So I think it actually has some practical benefits because this is kind of when a lot of the summer interns that are, still in law school, they're all like leaving this week. And then we kind of take over a lot of their casework when they leave. So it kind of works out well.
No, I think it does. I mean, I think that getting someone for a month or two, a couple months of really solid work without, this part-time work while you're distracted by this test that you gotta take.
But
No, I think it's a good model.
I mean,
I'm glad Philly is very flexible.
Okay.
They've always been very flexible in
so.
how people utilize their time. That makes for better, more effective use.
It never really
I agree.
occurred to me until
And
like.
this is the first time Winston's running it through PILI. So I don't know why they haven't in the past. They've handled it themselves, but yeah, they've always kind of, I'm sure
You know, a lot of them.
there's not going to be that many practical differences.
No.
But they're describing what they're doing and sometimes.
I get the cachet PILI offers, I guess. I don't really know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want my.
Well, I mean, there's always this politics of, Philly initiative, EPA initiative, who does what pro bono work and all this stuff.
Right.
I think that's what pro bono coordinators do, to keep track of what their firms are supposed to be.
Well, those are definitely the external pressures.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of the rankings and whatnot, they keep that in mind.
Yeah. Well, I think that it attracts, when you're trying to attract good, more and more good students, good law students want a firm that does pro bono work, is interested in that kind of thing, and to provide that opportunity.
All the
It's
other
great.
ones had some.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of internships.
They're done. I know, me too. It was great that last week thing that you two K added.
How you doing? Good to see you.
I know, I thought the same
Thanks for being here with us.
thing.
Yes.
Philly email came, I was like, I'm just gonna register for it now because if I don't, I'll
First things first, with gifts.
Thanks for doing this. No, don't run out. So we are on a webcast.
Okay.
So how do you want to each go individually? It's going to be focused up there.
Yeah.
So each go individually, and I'll leave it to you to figure out. I got to do some introductory things and some reminders, and then I'll turn it over to you both, and you can go.
Okay.
Okay, great. Perfect.
So you're going first.
I can't.
Okay. I think it makes sense for everybody to talk about
Yeah.
front end and all. The deep dark that way. That's it.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
If you go back towards the elevators, and just before you get to the elevator area, there'll be right to the left, the locker room area.
No, she texted me that she's coming, but. We'll do our best. I think all the others are.
Like, I think it's early.
Me, Mo, and then
I'm Priya.
Priya.
Nice to meet you.
You guys are that age.
Do you guys work together?
Yeah, we're at the did you guys see what she called you? For alert. Oh, okay. I didn't say. I am too. But yesterday was my first day, so I don't know anyone from the other offices. Oh, sure. Yeah. How do you like this? I like it a lot. Yeah.
Where are you guys?
Okay. We have an office in downtown somewhere. I didn't stop.
I used to teach like a block away from there.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
And you did some more?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I'm just kind of in the area.
Okay.
Started.
We're
91st and commercial. Yeah, which is. Yeah. Well, it's the office highway. Close to this highway. So we start okay. It's not far.
Yeah.
So are you on the west side or the side?
Yeah, it was very much like
We are east.
I remember like this and more.
I talked about you. So you like it though?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, when you guys when they went to down.
We're kind of disorganized, so we had to like
What's your office space?
right.
Oh, I definitely use it.
You know, it's actually
Yeah, so hopefully that
worked
will
out well, but we honestly, I'm going to clear I mean, they don't really come down. It's interesting, you know, like we get a lot of folks from Iowa who work with us. You know,
It's the same, it's actually weird. We get more University of Chicago, Boston than we get from
Are
Western.
you in Northwestern Drive?
Yeah.
I say, I just think that their school, even though they have a great clinical program, they're just not interested in policy.
No, they're not interested in public interest.
Yeah, no, it's just like, it's interesting. I noticed at the clinic where, I mean, I think, you have a handful come in who really are, whether it's wrongful conviction stuff, they're great, but by and large, they're corporate.
And also, for a school like that, they have a great clinic, but it's very limited. It's not like some of the bigger schools.
I
They're
agree.
supposed to have, all kinds of different kinds of.
I agree with that. I think it's interesting that, like I said, the Chicago. You come in from we don't know what the policy is, but it's ready. I hear now. I've reached out.
Let's say, like, next week.
Oh, they're on that.
Because usually,
I
even though it's like,
June 15th.
Yeah.
I got extension on June, so I didn't finish it till June.
I also do that too. I feel like there's never like
I graduated and then wrote a paper.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Where'd you go to school?
Michigan.
Michigan Law School?
Yeah.
How did you like it?
Very
I'm hoping so. Why?
So, folks, for,
Well, not for the
That's weird.
Okay, okay, yeah. Dude, I love that. You know,
yeah, no, it's
you know where you're going yet?
oh no, I'm looking for
yeah, because ours is a lot of people going like a lot of people who get into sports. Town shuts down on set.
I think I'm gonna go visit. I'm a brother in City Park, so it's gonna go.
Okay, cool. Definitely try to go on preview weekend. Preview weekend for the law school. You can put on a lot of events.
Okay.
The Northwestern.
They definitely
They're a little nuts there.
apply early.
Quite early.
Quite early.
So do you know Terrell
Yeah.
and
So graduation speaker.
really? I didn't know that. He's working at Shift with me.
Awesome.
And then
Emily?
Emily and Allison.
I don't know Allison. What's Allison? I don't know her as well. But Emily and
Terrell is your
Tara.
graduation speaker.
Yeah.
Oh my god. I can see that just knowing him.
He was kind of just a universally well-liked guy.
We might give it that rap.
Shift, they do those like consulting style panels.
Yeah, and then writing.
The writing test yesterday.
Although I have to say my Winston interview was probably the best lunch I've ever had.
Really? Who'd you go with?
Keepers. I can't remember. It was, I mean, I don't remember who I went with, but
Yeah.
we went to Keepers and it by far is still my favorite restaurant.
Block Foundation.
So are you gonna stay there?
So the way the fellowship works,
Well, they changed they all the staff. They used to do.
The forum, you guys, there's two different locations.
They had favorites. I love it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Do you like it?
That's also bad.
I just got in yesterday.
Do a lot of people take that option?
It was.
I think about half
My
of
first was
class.
an hour through our 80, it was growing around 600 now.
Joe Savarino.
$70,000.
The people, I watched the game 6 of the Blackhawks with them in Joe's apartment.
Scale.
Find it. So hard to figure out how. First of all,
That's what I'm saying. Like,
You're not even considered.
It's football, right?
Actually, one of my friends.
Dean's years and a half there. So she makes a problem.
How do that?
And I feel like the programmatic piece of it, it's fun. Like, especially if you're like, you can do this, you can do a great job. No, thanks.
We have a couple of summer
But
I think it's just
funky
Indiana.
piece, so it's like, it's just
None of my
comes
years.
out.
I met something like 16-inch.
If you get your wheel out, like this,
It's also, they're all into this, what they call, the measurable, tangible results. And organizations like yours and mine just aspire to, you can play around with it. You don't have enough, how many videos, right? All that.
Except we're terrible, so.
whether it's your has that metric or all,
Even with our head coach, we're still terrible.
So you provide a certified product, they can do that. They say, yeah, we've seen this many clients, or seen it now.
Yeah.
A lot of this stuff, having the reputation, having the which I think would be really counterproductive.
Yeah.
They had the work.
Well, that season we had two products last year. We had one like, actually ranked I read it the other grade. And then we lost it.
The word catalyst is a boiling word that doesn't get used.
Yeah, no, it's true, but it's kind of obvious. No one else is
That's right, but there's a reason why no one else is
He
doing
did
it.
sign
and that
a
is
pretty
because
good
nobody gets money.
Illinois quarterback. I actually watched him on the state game.
I mean, everybody says, oh, nonprofits never chase
Coming
money.
to your eyes.
Not really,
I
no.
remember
I
when
mean,
the
we've
bad
had it for
thing
the
was,
last 2 years, and
they
we're
were going
going
after
for
Con Ed.
No,
They
you know,
were saying,
and
every consumer organization. Oh, we're going after Con Ed too.
It's frustrating.
That's true, yeah. But, I mean, being a team that's not really test and they set by far, but it's still not that many.
They really wanted to collaborate what we're doing to Jennifer Howard,
Someone from our town is gonna talk to us.
so that you and I don't have to raise up there. Oh my God, no, thanks, this job.
You kind of have to, there's no way around it.
I think about it.
Right, we also got to talk about everything. Yeah.
This is one of the organizations. We end up having these different roles.
Literally after I.
I would love to have this talk about it. Okay, maybe not doing well.
Well, let's think about.
Yeah, but you definitely
Right now, no. I mean, I'm friends
Yeah,
with
no,
school.
I mean, we have like, yeah, I mean, we have a complementary business. In the course stuff, but, well, really nice. I have no insight into that. It's definitely a thing.
But it's the kind
Very,
of
very
thing
nervous.
that, well, it's the kind of thing, but it's also,
On Saturday,
it's
it's
rather small project. There's not as much, there's no incentive to bring it up to scale, which is what we're talking about.
That's, yeah.
But, I think if we combine our work,
Am I really proud of my professional?
we're very complimentary. Because whatever, because what you do, you should be working on front of us, so that you have a reduction in DOC.
Last year.
Which, of course,
Really proud.
we show through your great reports.
Right. When you can kind of do it,
And our job is to really affect what you do. So when I do there, it makes sense for us to be raising some code around it. And I think you could do this doing this project without new buildings, whatever it's called.
I really would like to go out of South End.
We're gonna go ahead and get started. We've got a slightly smaller crew as we come towards the end of our programming this summer. Some of you are either new or revisiting us after a few weeks away, otherwise occupied. Hope all of that aspect of your life went very well. But we do have a mix of interns and fellows here today. We have this session today and then one more session next week. The session for next week is issues involved in representing youth. It'll be in this room on Tuesday, August 13th, and that'll be our last session and our last lunch. We'll send out an email later today asking for RSVPs. As always, please be kind and RSVP to us. If there are folks who are at your agencies who haven't been coming and want to come to that program, they're certainly welcome. Just have them RSVP as well, or you can RSVP for them. We want to make sure that we have enough people in the room for our speakers next time. I think it'll be a great program. A couple reminders for you all. And if you haven't yet met me or don't know who I am yet, I am Mike Bergman, PILI's Executive Director. I'm the guy who keeps filling up your email all summer long. Soon that will stop for the most part. Almost all of you have completed your first service tracking form, but if you haven't, please do so as soon as possible. If you're just getting started or you've not yet completed your first half of that first 150 hours if you're a fellow, once you've completed that first 150 hours, please go ahead, complete that, and then complete the second one, which was sent out earlier this week to all of you. That's for the second half of your internship or fellowship. So divide your hours in half, and whatever those hours are, 1 and 2. Don't get distracted by May to June or July to August in the titles. It's really about the first half and the second half. But that information is super critical for us. We have to report back to all of our funders to let them know the types of work you did, the types of clients you served, the experience you had overall. So it's really critical for us. We really appreciate you taking some time to do that. It's not terribly long or painful. It'll take you about 10 minutes, really critical for us to have. The other critical thing for us is the overall evaluation of your summer experience. So for interns later this week, fellows later this month, I'm going to send out an email with a survey that is all of your experience this summer as an evaluative process so that we can learn more about your experience, how it was, if there were any issues you faced or any challenges you had, the types of work you did, the impact you had in the work that you were doing. This also is very critical for us to talk to our funders about the program and the success of the program, but it's also evaluative, so it helps us improve. Every year we make adjustments, we make small changes, we make big changes sometimes based on the feedback that you give us. So we really do value it, we actually do read it, and we actually take action based on the things you say. So that is very important, particularly those of you who are interns and who are going to be going back to school. Try to get that done as soon as possible before you get back into the semester. Again, for the interns later this week, fellows later this month. PILI-funded interns and fellows, you also should have received an email from me about an opportunity to serve on PILI's board of directors. If you are either a fully or partially funded PILI intern or a PILI fellow, we take one each, one intern, one fellow, every summer from the outgoing class to serve a 2-year term on the PILI board of directors. It's an absolutely terrific opportunity to get to know more about nonprofit management, to contribute to the success of PILI, and also to meet pro bono and public interest leaders from around the state on our board of directors. We meet every other month, so 6 times a year, so that's 12 meetings over that 2-year period. You need to be here in Chicago. We're able to get to Chicago for those meetings, which are held over the lunch hour, with lunch provided. Each month, hosted by usually one of the law firms that are represented on our board of directors. For interns, I need your cover letter and your resume in my email box by the end of this week, by Friday. Fellows, you've got until the 16th to get me your cover letter and your resume. Cover letter should touch on why this is of interest to you, what you think you would bring to PILI, why you're interested in this experience. And then I will reach out to everyone after those deadlines and start scheduling brief phone interviews where we'll talk a little bit more about your background, and then we'll go ahead and pick those so that those individuals will be up for election by our board at the end of September. So that's roughly the time frame. After the end of September, we'll have that election, and I will notify the 2 individuals who have been selected for that 2-year term. Anyone has questions about any of these things, and most importantly, if you don't know what I'm talking about relating to any of these things, definitely reach out to me. Julia here is on this side of the webcam. Shayna's in the other room on the other end of the webcam. For those of you who weren't with us last week, or haven't heard yet, Sheila Simhan, PILI's program manager, left PILI as of last week to go to Loyola's Career Services in the School of Law. So don't email Sheila anymore, though I'm sure she'll love to hear from you. She won't be able to help you. Reach out to either Julia, Shayna, or myself. With that, I'm going to turn things over for today's program, Criminal Justice Reform in Illinois. We have 2 representatives from 2 of our participating agencies here today. Malcolm Rich, the Executive Director of Chicago Appleseed Fund for Justice, and John Mackey, Executive Director of the John Howard Association. Each of them will talk a little bit about themselves and their background, their organizations, what they do, and give you some important updates in criminal justice reform here in the state of Illinois. Please join me in welcoming them and give them your attention.
any special honors?
You're perfect.
Okay, thanks. I'm Malcolm Rich. John and I have discussed the order and as far as criminal justice reform goes, and I'm going to go first because I'm going to talk about the front end of the criminal justice reform system, trying to get defendants out of the criminal justice system. And John is the head of a very prestigious prison reform organization, the John Howard Association, is going to talk about how to improve our prison systems and how to reduce them in terms of their size. And it seems to be a nice order to start pre-trial all the way through the prison system. I am the executive director of the Chicago Appleseed Fund for Justice. It's a non-for-profit organization. We are a social impact research and advocacy organization which initially uses research to identify community injustices. And we use best practice research to bring ideas into this jurisdiction. We determine how things actually work here and develop recommendations for how to improve things. To maximize our effectiveness, we collaborate with the Chicago Council of Lawyers, which is a public interest bar association, which gives us the access to large numbers of pro bono help, as well as advocacy services. I wanted to start off by talking about where we are in criminal justice reform in Illinois. Give you some ideas about where we might be going because of some very big things that are happening in Illinois, and then give some suggestions about how we should be going in the future. We started off with a comprehensive look of the felony courtrooms in 2007. At that point, things were very slow going in terms of reform. There were a few drug and mental health courts. Basically, 150 people were coming through Central Bond Court at 26th in California every morning, and 150 people were marched back into prison without bail being posted or allowed. There was no motion for reconsideration, and in fact, the Central Bond Court was done by television for so-called security reasons. Defendants were marched through the basement of the criminal courts building, the Layton Courts building at 26th in California. They appeared before something that looked just a little stand here, platform with a webcam essentially, and they were then looking to the camera. There was a judge on the upper floors of the 26th in California building, and they were then basically given their bond decision after a hearing of 35 seconds. We observed, we noticed not only is it inhumane, but because of the craziness of marching people before a small camera, there were actually people being given bond who were not the right people. It was an awful atrocity. And the other thing that was happening was that the judges themselves on the first floor were essentially mocking defendants sometimes through our bond, through our observers, because those defendants weren't in front of them. They're making fun of them. And what was happening was that there was an increased amount of threats that were being made against those judges by those defendants who felt they could respond in kind. In 2008, there was a dramatic change. What ends up happening is that the chief judge of the Circuit Court of Cook County goes to 26th in California and sees the new management of the situation and changes through an administrative order. In December 15th of 2008, Central Bond Court then becomes an in-person hearing. And pretrial services are suddenly provided for the first time since 2001. And at that point, we think that's when reform got started. Criminal justice reform got started in Illinois. Because people saw that there could actually be some change, that you wouldn't just have to put people back in jail, and in large part, could put back in jail on drug charges that were the result of this war on drug debacle. Since 2007, there have been a lot of changes. There's been a large number of diversion courtrooms that have been established, drug and mental health court calls, that have helped some and left most without services. There are 19 specialty courts in Cook County right now that have been created between 2007 and 2012. Those are drug and mental health courts. And they serve fewer than 700 people per year. Now, you got to look at, that's a lot of people, but when you look at the fact that 40,000 defendants go through Cook County criminal justice system every year, and estimates range between 50 and 59% of them are basically having drug and mental health issues. And in fact, they really shouldn't be in jail at all. They should be receiving treatment services. The result is ruined lives, ruined communities, and a lot of taxpayer money going down the drain. Today we have smaller deferred prosecution programs. These are pre-plea programs where people have to agree to certain conditions and then their charges are dropped. Again, all of which are basically helping a few people, relatively speaking. Evaluation is done not by third-party independent sources. The groups, the state's attorney's office who runs the program, for example, runs a drug program, the mental health court, for example, evaluates the mental health court program. What we have is a system that's filled with a lot of small diversion-oriented programs and a Cook County jail that's filled to overcapacity with mostly men of color, and about 9,500 men of color and 500 women of color who actually receive very good services because of grants and federal money that's come in to provide really excellent services to those women who are in the Cook County jail. But in general, most people are sitting in jail. Most don't belong there. Most are there because they can't make a relatively small bond. And even more shocking is that every year, 10 to 12,000 defendants are arrested, oftentimes on drug-related charges, and it's oftentimes small drug-related charges. They are arrested, jailed, their bond is denied, they go back to jail, and then 25 days later, their charges are dropped at their preliminary hearing. The first time they really see the judge outside of bond clear. The reason that the charges are dropped is either the arresting cop doesn't show up, or there is no evidence to base the charge. Because we don't have felony review in Cook County in drug cases. Felony review is a program of the Cook County State's Attorney's Office that reviews cases and makes recommendations as to whether someone should be arrested and charged. Or at least charged, if we please make the arrests, obviously. However, because of cost issues, there is no felony review in drug cases. So all the drug cases basically just flow right through, are charged, and go into the system. Now what does this mean? We have 10 to 12,000 people who are being released after being in the Cook County jail, awaiting trial, presumed innocent, for 25 days. And that means that a lot of lives are being ruined unnecessarily. We have a system where bond court judges are living in constant fear that if they release people on bail, and then they go out and do something harmful, that they're going to get blamed for it. There's no guidelines, real guidelines, for bond court judges to follow. And there's no really proposed bail amounts for particular fact situations. So the judges have complete discretion, which also means that the judges have no protection, which means to them that it's just the easiest route is just to keep people in jail. So we have a system today that's filled with good faith efforts that are not very coordinated, and it's not designed to maximize diversion. The one thing that we have today that we didn't have several years ago is that we have stakeholders who really care and want to do things differently. The president of the Cook County Board is a breath of fresh air in terms of trying to produce new ideas into the criminal justice system. The chief judge of the circuit court wants to change things. The Sheriff Dart is always on the news talking about proposed innovations. But the problem is that nobody gets along with each other enough to negotiate a truly coordinated system that's really going to reduce the jail population. And that leads us to today, because I'm going to, usually a lot of times these kind of presentations are a lot of facts about how awful things are. But what I want to talk about is that we are on the verge of a potential real revolution in the criminal justice system in Illinois. It could really dramatically change the way things are done. And the reason that it's going to dramatically change is because of the Affordable Health Care Act. which has allowed Medicaid funding to flow into Illinois. Cook County had applied for and has succeeded in getting a waiver from the federal government for Medicaid funding to start flowing into Illinois today, and even more so in 2014. So what does this Medicaid funding do? What we've done is set up something called County Care, which is a Medicaid insurance program. Just like you sign up for the insurance program, like anyone would sign up for an insurance plan, you get a card, and you go to a doctor or to an emergency room, you show your card, and you get services. And these services include behavioral health services, which include drug and mental health care treatments. This means that right now, when defendants come into the Cook County system and they need drug or mental health treatment, really 10% of them can receive paid-for services, which is obviously not very much. And we've heard over and over again, you can't have diversion, widespread diversion in Cook County because there's no money for it. But now there is, because the Medicaid funding is going to pay for 90%, theoretically, 90% of defendants who need services will have them paid for. Which means that if the court decides to re-engineer itself so that it can utilize this money effectively, the jail population should drop. And not only in Cook County Jail, but the Department of Corrections prisons as well. But this all hinges on the court system being able to re-engineer itself to reflect a new reality. It's in a way, going back to the progressive era in the early 1900s, when there were boys' courts in Cook County, there were girls' courts in Cook County, there were prostitute courts in Cook County. Every conceivable class of individual who needed help had their own court system, courtrooms, where judges were quasi-social workers. And there was a lot of problems at that time. If you like read the newspaper articles, people were screaming about judges should be there as umpires to call the balls and strikes and put people away in jail. But what happens is that what is shown in research is that when courts decide to serve that social work function, it helps people without hurting the system as a whole. Now, right now, what we'd like to do is to present ideas that will allow a re-engineering of our court system so that it can reflect this reality, so it can become, provide the services for a system that is, in effect, the biggest provider of mental health and drug treatment services in the county. Our community health system, our community mental health system is in dire shape. Oftentimes, we have seen people who want to be arrested because that's the only way that they can get services in terms of drug treatment or mental health services. It's a system that's turned on its head, but this is what we have, and we have to deal with that. And the court system needs to re-engineer itself to reflect this kind of reality. So what we want to start with, I'm going to give you a sort of a blueprint of how we think things could change. We think, to begin with, we need to convene stakeholders and their staff. The stakeholders being the chief judge, president of the Cook County Board, the sheriff, the chief probation officer, the Cook County Public Defender, the Cook County State's Attorney, and all other court-related persons who affect the criminal justice system. And really start a negotiation to design a coordinated system of diversion, and this is the key, that is brought to scale. Not just helping 700 people, but helping to divert thousands and thousands of people every year, which will really lead to a reduction in the Cook County jail system. Now, there are models of this, and it's worked in other jurisdictions. Supreme Courts have called for this convening after being embarrassed because of poor behavior and performance of their criminal justice system. Major foundation funders have called for these kinds of convening. Because if there's no effective communication among these stakeholders, reforms are all going to get sabotaged and we will be relegated to very small programs where there's cherry-picked numbers of defendants, where the persons who set up the programs want success. And the way to do that is to cherry-pick a few people that have a higher probability of success. And that works for that number of people, but it doesn't work for the system as a whole. We would like to see diversion started sooner. We want felony review reintroduced in drug cases, but keep in mind the budget ramifications. So Anita Alvarez, who's the state's attorney, might say, why should I pay for more state's attorneys to do felony review in drug cases when the result is fewer people going through the court system and being put in jail so that Chief Judge Evans and Sheriff Dart get the benefit, and I get the cost. And this is the kind of thing that can be changed through the budget process. And we have to recognize that we are funding a criminal justice system, not just the individual parts of it. We would like to see the change the culture of Central Bond Court. Right now, Central Bond Court is there to assess flight risk and set bond accordingly. But the second goal should be to identify those individuals who are not flight risk, but who will benefit from treatment, benefit greatly, and benefit more from treatment than from being in jail. And those persons should be diverted immediately from bond court and not jail. We would also like to see an increase in the use of motions for reconsideration of bond, so that every time the person goes through the system, there's a motion to say, we now have better information, Judge. This person's bond should be reduced so that he or she can be released from the jail and pending trial. We'd also like to see an early assessment of cases. There are other jurisdictions which assess cases weeks earlier than Cook County. In Philadelphia, for example, in Brooklyn, for example, cases are assessed within a day. Preliminary hearings are done within several days. And the question is, why is our preliminary hearing wait until for 25 days? And we've asked that of prosecutors in other jurisdictions, and the answer is because the prosecutors in Cook County have those 25 days. The prosecutors in Philadelphia and Brooklyn don't. By statute, we have in Illinois, prosecutors have 30 days to have a preliminary hearing. In other jurisdictions, it's 7 to 14 days. And so prosecutors respond accordingly. It's human nature. So in Philadelphia, assessments are done within 17 hours of arrest. Milwaukee is 24 hours. Brooklyn, same thing. In each of the jurisdictions, there's a pretrial case assessment unit within the prosecutor's office do nothing but early assessment of defendants with an emphasis on keeping the flight risk in jail, charging those who deserve to be charged, and releasing those where the charges are not warranted, and diverting into treatment services those who will benefit from those services. And it's a buy-in from the whole system, the judges, the prosecutors, the public defenders, and in fact, the private defense counsel all cooperate in the system. So we would recommend that statutes in Illinois should be changed to at least no more than 14 days as far as a requirement for preliminary hearing, which will force the system to move faster. So that's another aspect that we think should be done. And in Philadelphia, the question is, how do you get this all done? And I just want to relay that sometimes things happen because of the media. In Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Inquirer did an expose of the criminal justice system in Philadelphia, and it found that there was just no assessment of cases. Everything was just going straight through. And in fact, the prosecutors had a conviction rate of 8%, which shocked everybody. And in part because so many of these cases should not have been charged. Then the Pennsylvania Supreme Court took up the case and took up the matter and said, okay, that's just the media. It can't be right. We're going to do our own study. And they did their own study and then released their own report and said, yeah, the Philadelphia Inquirer was correct. And you, Philadelphia criminal justice stakeholders, fix it because this is a great embarrassment. At that point, that's in 2010, within 2 years, they have set up their early assessment system. There's total buy-in from the prosecutors and the defense counsel. And within 2 years, pretrial incarceration has dropped between 10 to 15%. The same sort of thing happens in Brooklyn. The same sort of thing happens in Milwaukee. You have early assessment. Cases don't go forward when they shouldn't, and the prison population drops. We also would like to see a triage. We want a diversion system put into place. So if you have more serious cases go to existing drug and mental health courts where a large amount of resources are applied to individuals who need help. When I say more serious cases, these are people who have been arrested numerous times, oftentimes because of their drug habits or because of their mental health problems. Research shows that those drug and mental health courts help these people the most. They help the most serious cases the most, and therefore save the most money for taxpayers, because these are individuals who are going to continue to end up in jail and come back into the system. But what we also need is another part of the system that doesn't yet exist, but we think it will exist soon. And it will exist because of the commitment of stakeholders and because of the money through the Affordable Health Care Act. And that is diversion courtrooms that deal with low-end cases. Cases where they're non-violence, cases where there's no victim, not just like grade 4 drug cases, but non-violent retail theft. Any kinds of cases where you're talking about basically victimless harm, and in fact retail theft cases are often drug related. And what we would like to do is have the diversion courtroom where there's trained judges, trained probation officers, trained court personnel working hand in hand with treatment providers, so that individuals will be diverted from the system, and once they successfully achieve the conditions of their probation, the charges are dropped completely. To allow people to go back into their communities, do the work that needs to be done to help them solve their own problems, and then have that charge be removed from their record. What we'd like to do then is have, once there is this diversion courtroom, it then gets replicated throughout 26th Street, so that judges and especially trained staffs in this prototype courtroom will then train the judges and the staffs of the other courtrooms, so that every courtroom at the 26th Street facility that's not currently a mental health or drug court will ultimately be a diversion courtroom, not just for those particular cases, but the judges and their staffs will be ready to divert whenever possible. And to put this all together, we are calling for an exemplary probation, Cook County Adult Probation Department that's modeled after the Cook County Juvenile Court Probation Department, which is recognized to be one of the best. We have a model here, and we really do need an adult probation system that not just is there to handle the problem when a probationer screws up, but to help find services for that probationer and make sure that that probationer keeps at it and fulfills the obligations. Finally, there really needs to be a total data analysis and collection system from an independent source. A third party who can really allow our system to be evidence-based, make decisions based on data that is collected and analyzed independently. We know what programs work, what programs don't work, how many people are going into which programs, and make sure that there is as good a fit between defendants and treatment services as possible. And we believe if all of these things come together, that we will be diverting thousands and thousands of individuals from our system, and the jail population will decrease. Thank you.
So everything Malcolm said. So I have a handful of things I want to talk about, kind of lay them out. How long do I have? About 20 minutes? Okay. Well, let me hope I'll get through them all. First of all, my name is John Mackey. I'm the executive director of the John Howard Association. We're one of the oldest prison reform groups in the country. We're founded in 1901. And more importantly, though, we are the only independent group that regularly monitors correctional facilities within the Department of Juvenile Justice and the Department of Corrections. Let me explain a little bit how our model works. It's pretty unique. So I said we're the only group in Illinois that does this. We're actually one of the very few in the country that does this kind of work. This is, even though we spend more than $200 million a year on our correction system throughout the country, there's very little monitoring, advocacy work being done inside the prisons themselves. It's kind of a gap within the justice system. I mean, that's where everything kind of heads eventually. It's very underthought, very underexamined. So as I said, we've been doing this for about more than 100 years. Our model is, it's all relationship based. We don't have a mandate. We have no statute that says we can go into facilities. It's just that we really predate these institutions. And so we're almost like part of the architecture. And I really think even the Department of Corrections, the Department of Justice, they don't fully realize they can kick us out if they wanted to. I do think if they tried to, we would probably get that mandate. We'd probably become more powerful. But again, it's kind of a relationship that we have. Every year we hear from around anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 inmates and their families through letters, phone calls, emails. And they kind of tell us about what's going on with individual issues, updates. We also have, we talk to everyone within the system. Correctional staff, the union, governor's office, legislators who fund these, who are in committees that fund the prison system. And we use all this information to kind of target facilities that we want to visit. In the Department of Corrections, there's about 26 prisons and other smaller programs. In the Department of Juvenile Justice, there are 6 facilities. Before we go, we send the facility a pretty exhaustive questionnaire, which gets to things like vital statistics, programming, staff levels, that kind of thing. And then we also use, again, all letters we get from inmates and their families. Then we visit the prison, and a typical visit, we recruit volunteers, I should say. That we have program staff, but the visits themselves are also staffed by volunteers from the community, people with law, education, psychology, medicine. We select the facility, we start off, we spend about the whole day there, we talk with the warden, we talk with the line staff, and we basically get the run of the facility. Now there's no doubt, and we know this really well, that both agencies in Illinois will clean up for us, they'll paint the walls sometimes, the floor's a little shinier. But basically we get most information from talking to people. And out of these reports, or out of these visits, we generate, kind of snapshot reports, which include our findings and recommendations on individual facilities, which are which are based on the visit, the research we've done, the conversation interviews we've done, but also our own research into best practices across the country. And we issue these reports on our listserv and the media, which we use, I think, very effectively. To generate media coverage, to kind of influence opinion, and then kind of one step removed, we use these reports as kind of systemic view, or to create a systemic view of these agencies, to argue for what we see as our mission, which is to promote safe, cost-effective prison reform. So let me say a little bit about myself too, as a quick thing. I'm a lawyer. Before I was at John Howard, I was at the Center on Wrongful Convictions. Before that, I was a community organizer. I've been a teacher. I've done a bunch of things. And there's another story about how I got to John Howard, which I'll go into later if you like. So what I want to talk about really briefly, I feel like Malcolm had the talk of hope. My talk might go into despair. Hopefully, I'll bring it up to hope again. But I want to talk a little bit about the history of prisons, and how we got to where we are today, and some of the things going on about how we'll get out of the situation we're in. So I think history of prisons is a really important concept. The history, I think, is not only about where we've been, but it suggests a different version of how things could be. And I think even though prisons, I think probably to most of us, certainly to me before I began this work, felt oddly ahistorical, right? They felt like, well, how else could you deal with crime but have prisons? And I think actually in advocacy, you often come up against this. You'll hear, true, maybe prison is awful, but what else are you going to do but put someone in a cage? I mean, that kind of thinking, I think, comes in part from a lack of a sense of history. Our system today is still fairly unique in the world, although other countries are kind of catching up with the United States. But we incarcerate more people than any other country in the world, both by just number and per capita. But we didn't always do it this way. And actually, again, this kind of thing, which is often called mass incarceration, is a fairly new historical phenomenon. And in many ways, we're in uncharted ground. For example, one of the rising populations right now in Illinois' prison system and across the country is a growth in elderly prisoners. They're the fastest growing prison population. And this presents all kind of operational challenges and issues that I think are really difficult because no country's ever really done this before. No society in the history of the world has incarcerated this many elderly people. So we don't really know what this is, like how it affects the populations, what kind of issues it presents. One question, for example, and you'll see this over and over again in corrections, is that people will say things without any research that backs it up, because there's often not because the research, and it's because the research is not there. So you'll hear people, for example, speculate about that prison actually can decrease your life expectancy. Don't know that. Actually, and again, there's kind of competing studies that show maybe yes, maybe no. One study has shown that prison might take as much as 10 years off a person's life. Other studies have shown, and they're all kind of small sample bases, so that's why we can't generalize yet. Other studies have shown that if you kind of factor out, with your people in prison, if you factor all other factors, so it's just the prison that you're looking at, prison actually might increase life expectancy because you're not smoking in prison. Medical care is pretty bad, but at least it's there. Food, pretty bad, unless it's there. So there's some things that we just don't know about these places. And again, largely because we haven't really focused on them. But as I got kind of sidetracked. So once upon a time, say pre-1970, Illinois and the country had a pretty small prison system. For most of the 20th century, we had a prison system under 250,000 people. Illinois, up until 1975 or so, had a prison system under 10,000 people. And then in the mid-70s, in Illinois and across the country, if you see this graphed out in a PowerPoint paradigm, I have a PowerPoint, you see a vertical spike in prison population. And you probably, I don't know if you've seen it before, but it's every state, country is the same. It's like flat lines and we went from a prison population, again, 10,000, under 10,000 by 75, to today almost 50,000 people, 30,000 people on parole. About 900 kids in the Department of Juvenile Justice, and another 1,500 to 2,000 kids on parole. And I want to get to how we got there in a second, but I want to just talk about kind of where we are now. I think to do that, because we visit prisons, I often kind of try to wrap around my talk and anecdotes and things I've seen. And this is because the anecdote purpose is to kind of get at the spectrum of people inside prison. Early on in my tenure at John Howard, I was visiting, we were monitoring Pontiac Correctional Center, which is one of the oldest prisons in Illinois. It was built in 1867. To call it a dungeon is a pretty accurate description. It's where death row used to be housed. It's Illinois. Before we used to have TAMS, which was a supermax prison. We closed TAMS. But Pontiac was and still is Illinois' punishment prison. It's where people are sent who cannot be held within the general population or who are particularly vulnerable. So kind of high profile cases. But again, it's also where we used to have death row. So early on in my tenure at John Howard, I was visiting Pontiac, and it actually we were visiting death row. And it was a day actually that the Senate was voting to abolish the death penalty in Illinois. And because I had worked in wrongful convictions, at this time, Illinois death row was 16 people or so. And because I had worked in wrongful convictions, I knew a lot of the cases there. I knew, this isn't the purpose of John Howard, but I knew these are pretty bad cases. I knew some of the people, and I knew their stories. So, and it was weird because we were actually on death row in the very moment that the Senate was voting to abolish the death penalty. So death row inmates were talking about that, or just the conversation, which is what you do. Actually, one of the greatest things about visiting a prison is sometimes how boring it is. Prisons are not terribly exciting places. That's kind of even they're just not much goes on, especially in maximum security facilities where people are just locked in cages. But what's amazing is, even when you're in a place like Pontiac or some of the more other states' maximum security facilities, when you're talking to someone with bars, eventually the bars will kind of just melt away. You're not going to have a conversation, and then you kind of forget where you are. It's a really weird experience. But I had this experience in death row, and I was talking to this guy who was kind of phenomenal. Like again, I knew where I was. I knew I was at Pontiac. I knew I was in death row. I knew everyone there. I'd probably done something pretty horrible. And Pontiac's also where we house a huge number of people with serious mental illness. In fact, part of my story will go into that. And most people in Pontiac, you see clear signs of mental illness. A pretty complex phenomenon in prisons. People will self-mutilate. They'll just get so kind of agitated, they'll start cutting themselves. And so you see them with their shirts on, there's just scars everywhere. Or they're agitated. You can tell if they don't have some kind of diagnosable illness. There's not something right with them. You can feel it, and you can feel your conversation. There's delayed thought. There's all those kinds of things. Well, this guy that I was talking to was totally. Not only was he completely articulate, he was like charming. It was a weird experience. I was talking to this guy, and it was just this guy was funny. He was making jokes, and I felt really quickly this guy was kind of in my head in a way, like he could anticipate what I would find funny, and it just was a weird. I was sitting talking to him. I thought, I know this guy is probably he's probably a very, very dangerous person. But he's inside my head, and he's read me. He's totally read me. And I can imagine being at a bar with this guy, and like if he wanted, to ride home or something, I'd be like, yeah, sure, why not? He looked like my next door neighbor, even inside a prison cell. Now later on, as I walked off, the guy, the psychologist was saying, oh, this man you were talking to is a very dangerous sexual psychopath. Again, John Howard, that's not why we're there. We're there for humane conditions. We believe no matter what you've done, you can't disavow your right to humane conditions. That's not what we care about. But I was struck by that, and I knew it was probably, he was probably in there for something very similar. Later on, I had a friend who used to work at the Capital Appellate Defense Division when we had the death penalty. And it kind of came up that I met this guy, and she was like, oh my God, this was my client. And his MO, his thing was he would post advertisements on Craigslist, and he would lure women and rape them and kill them and burn them. He had seduced a prison guard at one point, and they escaped together, did a crime spree. And this guy was like, to be clear, I'm telling the story to say, there are folks in prison who are really dangerous. There are very few of them, I think, who are like that, but they do exist. So on the one hand, Pontiac had someone like this, right? This is a guy, poster child for prison. Like, I'm glad, John Howard, we want to see you to be humanely treated, but you need to be incapacitated. There's something wrong with you. You are dangerous, right? So that same day, I was kind of digesting that experience, and then maybe like 20 minutes later, we were in the serious treatment unit at Pontiac. And this is where people are held who are so severely mentally ill, they really can't be held in the general population. And everyone there was just kind of comatose, drugged out, kind of walking around. And there was actually the psychologist and psychiatrist at Pontiac was, I think, really good. They were talking very sympathetically about their patients, the inmates there. And then as they're kind of walking down the cell block, we came to one cell, and you could start hearing this guy screaming about how there's dead babies cooking in his cell. And over and over again, there are dead babies cooking in my cell, help me, help me, help me. It's just disarming. So we asked the psychiatrist, so who is this man and what's wrong with him? And the psychiatrist, who was kind of, kind of lowered his shoulders and kind of in a tired way, was like, oh, this is Mr. So-and-so, and yes, he has schizophrenia, he's very, very ill, and we give him medication, and when we can, we try to put him into group therapy, but, it's probably the best we can usually do for him. I didn't know anything about this, and I kind of thought, okay, that maybe he's right, in the back of my mind, and again, even though this is not what John Howard's supposed to be about, I thought, well, this guy too is probably someone really dangerous, right? Like the guy who's met in death row. Well, at any rate, later on, one of our volunteers looked up this guy's case, which you can do on DOC, just type him in. This guy wasn't there for any violent kind of crime. He was there for a property offense. He was due to be out in about a year and a half or so. And he had a long criminal history, none of it violent, but his primary problem was he was severely mentally ill, and we have no capacity in our communities to handle someone like that, so we throw him in prison. Prison also doesn't have any capacity to handle someone like that, so eventually they put him in segregation. So I think that in some ways kind of captures the spectrum of people inside our prison system today, right? You have, without a doubt, some folks, I would argue it's a very small number, who are pretty dangerous, who need to be incapacitated, humanely, but need to be there. Then there are folks who just have no business being inside a correctional system. The correctional system can't deal with their problems. They end up being treated in really perverse ways that's certainly not going to make them better. And then in between that, you have all kinds of folks. You have folks who are, what I always like to say is the reason Illinois has a crowded prison system is because we have a lot of folks who are kind of just, ne'er-do-wells. I have a curse report I won't use, but people who are just like, they're going to steal stuff, they try, whatever it is, they don't learn. But they're not necessarily, they're not dangerous. They're kind of almost like a public nuisance in a way. And yet we incarcerate them with the guy who's killed and raped women, right? We house them next to the person who's so severely mentally ill, they just have to put them in a cage and can't do anything else with them. So that in some ways I think is our prison system. I should add one more piece to it. All throughout the country, although we're seeing declines in the prison population, we have seen them for the last couple of years. As a country, we don't only have a very large prison system, we have a very crowded prison system. Almost in every state, and Illinois is one of the worst, we have far more people than these prisons were designed to hold. Right? In Illinois, we have a system, as I said, of about 50,000 people. It was only designed for 32,000. And so that's kind of where we are. Now here's the question: is like, how did we get there? I think this is a really hard question, and I think and it's interesting right now. It's kind of a hot question. There's been a handful of books recently that have kind of delved into it. Probably most famously, the new Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. Really important, provocative book. It's interesting that we can ask the question, like, how do we do this? How do we arrive at a situation where we now incarcerate 2.3 million people or so. And I think what it portrays is we don't really know the answer. And I think that's actually more fundamental to how we got to where we are. I think in some ways, there was an article, I don't know, a year or so ago in The Onion, and the title was Smart Qualified People Behind the Scenes Keeping America Safe, quote, we don't exist. I think that's true of the prison system and kind of the way it's set up. I think it's and I think this is, as lawyers, it's really important, right? You think, I certainly saw this in wrongful convictions. You walk, these systems are so important. They're not only are they're charged with vital function, printing the Constitution, all this really important stuff, but they're really expensive, right? In Illinois, we spend $1.3 billion on the prison system. Prison employees account for almost 20% of state salaries, right? These huge, important systems tax these really important functions. And I think it's hard not to think, hard not to assume, surely someone must have designed this system, right? Surely there's someone behind the scenes who had a plan. And I think the most frightening thing, and this is something that in my own work I keep coming up against, and I'm always a little bit surprised by it, even though I feel like I know it now, is that the problem is no one designed this. No one really intended, no one, say, in 1972 or something thought, I got a great idea. I'm going to defund mental health. I'm going to increase penalties, and I'm going to blow up the prison system. I'm going to crowd the prison system. I don't, it wasn't quite like that. And I think instead what you have is ad hoc policies, laws. You have things that are run on election cycles. You have opportunism that together have created this thing that we no longer have control over. And actually, that happened really quickly. I'll tell you a really quick story about that. So most people don't know in Illinois that before, say, 1995, the Illinois prison system was completely controlled by gangs. And I mean completely, where there wasn't locks on the doors, there were no inmate uniforms, gangs determined cell assignments. The prison administration really had to negotiate with the top gangs to just run things. Everyone knew this. And here's how it happened, and I'll tell you how it kind of ended. So basically, we went from a prison population of under 10,000 people, and then you saw kind of a ramped up, you saw the defunding of mental health, you saw the kind of a devastation of manufacturing jobs, living wage jobs. You also saw kind of an orgy of tough on crime legislation, over-criminalizing, increasing penalties. It blew up the prison population, but it also brought in a different kind of inmate, and that was street gangs. And in Chicago, the street gangs were smart. These were like Fortune 500 companies, and they were run hierarchically. They had a chain of command. And essentially, when these folks came into prison, they were smarter than the folks who were running the prisons. In Illinois, right, most of the prison population, imagine Illinois here, comes from the Chicago area, Cook County. Most of the prisons are downstate Illinois. One of the biggest problems we have in Illinois is that our prison system is largely a Southern Illinois institution. And by Southern Illinois, I don't know if anyone who grew up in Illinois, but once you get to a certain point in Illinois, you are in the South. It is a different country in Southern Illinois. And so they just weren't, on one level, all kinds of stuff happened there. There's regional issues, certainly race issues, and there still are today. But they just weren't prepared for this. And the gangs they just took it over. And very quickly the gangs ran things. And that's just the way it was. No one talked about it, it's how it worked. Well, at one point, it's how often prison policy is determined. Malcolm mentioned the media, and this is what happened here. Illinois had one of Illinois' most infamous criminals, this guy named Richard Speck. He was like the Charles Manson, Ted Bundy of Illinois. He had raped and murdered 7 nurses in the late 60s. He was in prison. He was in prison and died in prison in the early 90s. Richard Speck was a really weird dude. Not only was he a psychopath, but in prison, he found a way to get female estrogen and had grown breasts and walk around in dresses, and just was kind of like a very out there kind of guy for a prison environment. People were scared of him, right? So anyway, after he died, a tape surfaced, and it ended up being this kind of, combination of gay porno tape and kind of celebration of Stateville prison, how great Stateville was. So it's Richard Speck and his boyfriend. They're doing things. Occasionally there's like cocaine, there's money over here. And they're just talking about how great Stateville is. And so when this tape came out, it was like, oh my God. And that kind of created the political will for legislators to break the back of gang control in the prisons. And with that, we went from, there were some bad things when gangs controlled the prisons. One, they were more violent in the sense that gangs could order hits. But there was also the gangs controlled violence. You wouldn't see these things pop up without gang control. There was also more programming too. And programming was a good thing, but it's also where gangs use, they've used programming to meet up. And so when Illinois came down and kind of broke, made Illinois a more secure prison system, they got rid of all that. So it's like, so the pendulum went from one place to the other really quickly. Kind of a story about how prison works. But I want to get to more how we got there. Again, I think it's the way to think about it is, and I think for you all, as young lawyers will be in some ways always involved in the system, kind of the gatekeepers of the system. It's lack of thought, it's lack of strategy. One of the most amazing things about, I think, our Department of Corrections, which is largely true across the country, is I think we're the DOC is the only agency in Illinois that really doesn't have a mission. And by that I mean a mission where you say, our job is to do this, and this is how you will judge us. This is how you will fund us. DOC's mission is more negative. It's more of a reactive institution, right? So if we increase penalties here, reactiveness, right? If we defund community health, react to it. And so it just kind of does. But at no point does anyone, the funders, DOC, ever go back into its operations and say, okay, well, here's what we're supposed to do. Here's what we've done. Here's how we're going to be. Here's how we're going to improve. Or here's where we failed. And I would argue, we don't know. No one even knows how DOC could fail. No one even knows how it could succeed. I mean, we talk about recidivism, right? And recidivism is a rate people return in prison within 3 years. And like Malcolm was talking about, there's good stuff in DOC here and there, little pockets of programming, but nothing to scale. Nothing that would touch the system itself. And I would argue, as it is right now, we have no way of judging it even. Basically, there's, I think, from 1970 on, give or take, we've created an institution which we have no purpose for, except to hold people who are difficult, right? Difficult meaning dangerous, mentally ill, drug addicted, or kind of a pain in the ass. That's a system we have. Now, a couple more things about that system. I think the hardest thing in fixing this, I want to kind of transition to the hope. The hardest thing about fixing this system we have is not policy. We don't need the smart people in the room to be like, okay, here's our policy idea. We actually have those policies. There are places in the country that are piloting really great stuff. Malcolm mentioned stuff in Philadelphia. In the state prison system, the New York prison system is pretty good. It's managed to downsize prisons, as it's also reduced crime. There's some other issues in New York, but that's a positive. There's some good stuff going on. The problem is not the policy. The largest problem is just the politics. Getting folks to kind of act for the public good. And that ends up being the hardest thing, in some ways the most impossible thing. Another quick story. So in the wake of the murder of Heidi Pendleton, which you guys are all following, right? This is right, the young woman who was shot in south side of Chicago. She was shot by a young man who had been arrested for carrying a gun earlier in the year, and he got out with, I don't know, some kind of probation or something. The city of Chicago and then the state attorney's office came together and proposed a mandatory minimum of 3 years for a certain gun offense, the unlawful use of a weapon offense. This is an offense right now on the books. You can get probation, but you can also get up to 10 years if it's aggravated, right? So this awful, out of this awful crime, this horrible tragedy, the city of Chicago's response was, we need tougher penalties for guns. That's how we're going to solve this problem. Classic tough on crime, right? That's how we have this. That's one reason why we have to watch prison system, because people's answer to horrible events is prison. And it's the most, if you think about it, I think this goes back to this idea there's not a lot of thought going into this. It's really primitive thinking, right? If it was easy, if it was as simple to really control crime as putting someone into a cage, we would have never had crime in society. I mean, that is the most primitive response I think you could imagine, right? If someone does something wrong, you hit them. If someone does something really wrong, you hit them harder. Now what you've done is you just hit the person, right? You're not necessarily gonna correct anything. And in fact, a lot of research shows that when you respond to crime through incarceration, you end up making that person worse. I think that makes a certain amount of sense if you think about it. But at any rate, the city of Chicago's response was, we need stronger penalties. In my position, I kind of freaked out because we had such a crowded prison system. I knew not only has really the country turned against, and all the kind of research and the best practices turned against mandatory minimums, so it's an awful idea. No evidence whatsoever that it deters crime. No evidence whatsoever that it does anything really good except incapacitate someone. And so, we were saying that and went down to Springfield to testify against it. And it was pretty much like a train heading in our direction. Like, I was going to get run over. The city of Chicago, they were kind of already crowing that they kind of won this debate. Well, then the cost came in, which kind of slowed things down. It turns out that their law they were proposing was going to cost about $1 billion over 3 years and add about 3,000 people to the prison system. People kind of slowed down a little bit, didn't quite, but it still seemed like it was going to pass. Ultimately, it ended up failing this last session because the NRA got involved. The NRA got involved for lots of reasons. I think largely because they don't like Chicago and they don't like. So again, politics, right? But politics ended up working in a good way here. Ultimately, though, the city of Chicago still wants this law. They still want. I was at a speech at an event yesterday where the superintendent of police, Gary McCarthy, who's a really, I think, brilliant police officer in many ways, this was his big ask, saying, if we're really going to solve crime in Chicago, we need this mandatory minimum. Ultimately, we're going to get it. Ultimately, I think the only reason we didn't get it this year is because it's been relatively cool this summer, and when it gets hot, people tend to get more violent. And we after Heidi and Pendleton, we haven't had that kind of high-profile crime which would drive legislation. So at any rate, this is all still a problem, and I know I was going to do it. I was telling a story for a particular reason. I think along with the politics is also just one of the problems of the system. It's just the way it's structured. Is that a lot of crime control is actually a cost transference system, right? So when the city of Chicago says, "I know the answer to crime. Let's put them into the jails or the prison system." Well, in one sense, goes to Malcolm's point. What they're really doing is moving someone off their budget, right? The city of Chicago, that's where a lot of the crime takes place. That's where crime. If they go to jail, that's on Cook County's budget, and in particular, Sheriff Dart's budget. Similarly, when a person goes from jail to the adult prison system, that's no longer the city's or the county's budget, that's the state's budget. So I think at every level of the justice system, the cost transference works against kind of real reform, right? There's all the incentive in the world to move people off your budget. And that's, at the end of the day, all the rhetoric aside, that ends up driving a lot of policy. And when you get in the closer rooms with folks and try to negotiate things out, that piece is hard, right? It's hard for someone to say, I mean, even, again, someone like, President Breckenfield, who I think is a really amazing advocate on this issue, when they talk about jail reduction, they see DOC as part of that part. Get people into prison faster. Again, she's got a broader initiative now, but that's definitely a piece of it. So that's also where we have, this is also where I think one of the chief problems we have in our system is that, a very wise person once told me that the problem with our system is that everyone in the system can do exactly what they're supposed to do, and the system's broken. And I think that's where we are right now. We have a system that wasn't designed for the kind of purposes that I think probably all of us in this room want, right? To promote safer communities, to control crime. But the good news is, all across the country, people are kind of waking up. I do think right now, we've been run with mass incarceration for the last 40-some years. Again, driven by all the stuff I talked about. Stuff on crime policies, bad drug policies, defunding community programming, et cetera, But I think people, I think this is like your age group, my age group, a little bit, I'm probably a little older than you. I've just seen this doesn't really work. It's really expensive and it's really inhumane. There's a perverse benefit, I think, actually to incarcerating so many people, is that more people are touched by the experience. We get calls John Howard all the time from a family member, a girlfriend, wife, husband, whatever, saying, my loved one's in prison, I didn't know it was like this. This is crazy. I can't talk, he's not getting medical care. So I think there's a growing base of people who are deeply unsatisfied with our prison system. And so now it's really, this goes back to Malcolm's talk, is that the question really is, will that dissatisfaction, will that disillusion with the system create reform? And I think across the country we're seeing yes and no. And I think at this end, I think here's your piece in this. So you guys are you lawyers now? Are you taking the bar? You're going to take the bar? We had some people online. At any rate, you're all going to be wonderful lawyers someday, maybe work at a big firm, be rich and powerful, care about this issue, okay? I mean, this is something that, like, as lawyers, you have a particular responsibility. There's only a few rights that prisoners have, but they're based in the Constitution. I think as lawyers, as the gatekeepers, as people who've seen this and who will probably see the system up close, I think it's a kind of, it imposes upon you, but you have a civic obligation to care about this system that no one else really wants to care about, that people inherently want to look away from, as the prisons are, as the jails are, right? There are ways of dealing with problems by pushing them away. You folks are the ones who have to have the strength to stand up to it, to look hard at it, and also to kind of help people like Malcolm and me do our work, which means serving on our boards, helping us raise money, helping us build political will, and ultimately that's how we're going to solve these problems. I don't know if I went too long on that, but thank you.
We are at 1 o'clock, but because we've got two great people here and you all don't have to run up to Barbary anymore, any questions for either John or Malcolm? Going once, twice. Okay, a couple other quick things. For you fellows, next week, in addition to that program that we're going to have at lunchtime, we're having an evening reception on Thursday hosted by the law firm of Goldberg Cohn. And so details about that are on the website, but you'll get an email from us asking people to RSVP. Great opportunity to meet some of the folks from PILI's board, some alumni, as well as to just get to know each other a little bit better and to celebrate all things that August stands for in your life right now. Shayna is in the back. She's standing by two green recycling bins. The plastic that your lunch came in is recyclable. So everything can go in those green plastic bins so that we can be good to the environment today. And was there something else you wanted me to say?
I think that was all.
She keeps whispering things in my ear and I'm distracted.
Couple things.
If this is your last session with us, thanks so much for being with us this summer. We hope you had a great experience. Please do fill out those service tracking forms in your evaluation. For those of you who will be there next week, look forward to seeing you at the lunch program and at the reception. Thanks again to our speakers.